The slap came faster than my mind could register. One moment I was holding my wineglass, standing quietly by the velvet-draped table, trying to stay invisible among the crowd of 120 wedding guests. The next, my face burned with a searing sting that spread across my cheek. The sound echoed off the crystal chandeliers above us, sharp enough to silence the laughter. The clinking forks, the violins stopped. My glasses slid down the bridge of my nose, crashed against the polished ballroom floor, and shattered into tiny glittering fragments that seemed to mock me. For a few suspended seconds, no one breathed. The groom's cousin froze mid-bite, a forkful of salmon suspended in the air. A toddler stopped crying as if shocked into silence. Even the quartet's bow hung in midair over the strings. It was Juliet, the bride, my son's brand new wife, draped in satin and pearls, her skin glowing with the triumph of youth, her painted lips curled into a sneer. She was radiant, yes, but not from love. Her radiance came from the intoxication of victory. "That's what you get for being so selfish," she spat, her voice slicing through the stillness. Gasps rippled like waves through the crowd. My knees weakened as I crouched, trembling, trying to collect the broken shards of my glasses with fingers that would not stop shaking. Tears blurred my vision, but I fought to keep them from spilling over. Juliet didn't stop. She towered above me in her pristine gown, lace sleeves catching the golden light, looking down at me as though I were filth dragged in on her perfect wedding carpet. "You don't need that big old apartment anymore," she said loudly enough for every guest to hear. "You live alone. You're 68 years old, overweight, and let's be honest, you're tired. To keep up a place like that, Ethan and I deserve privacy to start our new life. Your apartment is perfect for us while we shop for something better." Her words dripped with venom, every syllable designed to humiliate. My son Ethan, my only child, stood a few feet away in his tailored suit, eyes fixed on the floor. He didn't defend me, didn't even look at me. My heart cracked in places deeper than the bruise rising on my cheek. No one moved to help. Some guests turned away, unable to witness the cruelty. Others whispered behind manicured hands, but not a single person, none of Ethan's friends, none of Juliet's polished family, not even my church acquaintances who knew me for decades, dared to stand beside me. I rose slowly, clutching the table to steady myself, my cheek pulsing with pain. Inside, though, something else had broken. Something that had been quietly eroding for months, maybe years, finally snapped. That slap wasn't just a blow to my face. It was the punctuation mark at the end of years of mockery. It was a declaration of war. I should introduce myself. My name is Marjorie Carter. I am 68 years old. I am a black woman born and raised in Atlanta, Georgia. My body carries the weight of age and a few too many fried chicken suppers. My hips wide, my arms soft, my belly rounded. I have never apologized for it, though Juliet made it her mission to turn my shape into a source of ridicule. I work part-time at a flower shop 3 days a week, not because I need the money, but because I like to keep my hands busy and my heart surrounded by beauty. I drive a 10-year-old Buick, wear sensible shoes, and buy my clothes from discount racks. To the outside world, especially to Juliet, I look like any other working-class widow scraping by on Social Security. But appearances can lie, and mine are the biggest lie of all. For nearly 40 years, my late husband and I cultivated a secret life of wealth. Robert wasn't just the humble post office clerk everyone thought he was. He was an investor, clever and patient, who turned modest paychecks into real estate, stocks, and quiet fortune. Together, we built an empire hidden behind plain curtains, a deliberate disguise to protect ourselves from greed and exploitation. Juliet never knew. Not even Ethan knew. And tonight, this humiliating night, was the night I realized why we had hidden it. Because greed eventually comes for you. Even dressed in a wedding gown. I remembered the first time Juliet visited my apartment 2 years ago. She had wrinkled her perfect little nose the second she stepped inside. "Seriously, this is where Ethan's mama lives," she had whispered, not softly enough to keep me from hearing. I had smiled politely, offered sweet tea, and ignored the sting. That was the beginning of the slow, grinding humiliation. Every visit afterward was another dagger disguised as a comment. "Don't you have anything more fashionable to wear, Marjorie? That Buick looks dangerous. Shouldn't you move somewhere easier to manage at your age?" Each phrase was poison dipped in honey. My son, blinded by her beauty, echoed her words without thought, like a puppet dangling from invisible strings. Back in the ballroom, I forced myself to stand tall, though my chest shook with silent sobs. The crowd's eyes pierced me like spears. Juliet straightened her veil, her face glowing with triumph, while Ethan shuffled closer to her side like a boy hiding behind his mother's skirts. "You're not welcome here anymore," Juliet declared, voice steady, eyes hard. "This is our day. This is our future. You either hand over those keys, or you can forget being part of this family." The words hit me harder than the slap. For a moment, I wanted to scream, to tell them who I really was, to announce to the entire hall that the old, overweight widow they pitied was sitting on more wealth than Juliet's entire family tree combined, that my apartment was just a fraction of the properties I owned, that I had been generous enough to cover Ethan's tuition, his medical bills, his first car without him ever knowing it was me pulling the strings. But I stayed silent. I pressed a trembling hand against my cheek, drew in a shaky breath, and whispered only one word to myself: enough. Enough of humiliation, enough of protecting Ethan from the truth, enough of letting greed masquerade as love. I walked slowly toward the exit, my steps deliberate, my head held as high as my trembling body allowed. Behind me, the murmurs swelled again. Juliet's laugh followed like a cruel echo, sharp and victorious. But she didn't know. None of them knew. The slap that humiliated me had also awakened something fierce, something I had buried with my husband, a spine of steel, sharpened by loss and hidden behind humility, that as I pushed open the heavy double doors of the ballroom, the cool night air rushed against my swollen cheek. I pulled my phone from my purse with fingers that had finally steadied. "Carlos," I said when the line connected, "bring the documents, tonight, to the hotel." There was a pause on the other end, then my lawyer's confident voice. "Are you sure, Mrs. Carter?" "Completely," I replied, my voice stronger than it had been in years. 30 minutes, no more." I ended the call and looked back one last time at the Golden Hall, where laughter and music began again, as if nothing had happened. Juliet had won for now, but the war was just beginning, and this time, I wasn't fighting to protect Ethan. I was fighting to protect myself. The hotel lobby was still buzzing with the afterglow of the wedding when I slipped out into the parking lot. Clutching my purse like a lifeline, the valet rushed to open the door of my Buick, clearly recognizing me from the spectacle inside. But his eyes carried that look pity, disguised as politeness. I sat behind the wheel, heart pounding, face still stinging, but it wasn't pain that consumed me now. It was clarity. Juliet's slap had done more than bruise my cheek. It had stripped away the last illusion that I was part of their world. I wasn't mom to Ethan anymore. I was an obstacle, a stepping stone, a key literally to something she craved. My phone buzzed. "Carlos, on my way." 30 minutes. I stared out the windshield at the glowing hotel, where laughter and music swelled again, swallowing the scandal as though it had never happened. I pictured Juliet laughing with her bridesmaids, reliving her victory, Ethan by her side, silent and obedient. They thought they had cornered me. They thought humiliation would break me. But humiliation is a funny thing. It doesn't always destroy. Sometimes it sharpens. Back at my apartment, I moved slowly through the familiar rooms. The floral curtains Robert had loved. The mismatched furniture I refused to replace. The scuffed kitchen table where Ethan had once scribbled his homework. Juliet had called it outdated, embarrassing, small-minded. But as I traced my fingers across the wooden table, I felt something different. History, roots, the kind of wealth money couldn't measure. Still, Juliet's eyes had never lingered on the curtains or furniture. Her gaze always traveled to the balcony view. The skyline stretched across the horizon, the kind of view realtors salivate over. She ran her fingers along the crown molding, measured the width of the living room with her eyes. Her interest was never sentimental. It was transactional. The first time I knew for certain came 6 months ago. Ethan had gone to the bathroom, leaving Juliet and me alone in the kitchen. I brewed chamomile tea, the steam fogging the window, when I heard her whispering on the phone. "Yes, Mama, the place is huge. 3 bedrooms, perfect for us. No, she doesn't use half of it. Honestly, it's wasted on her. Don't worry, Ethan will handle it." Her voice was low but sharp, like glass cutting through fabric. My hands shook as I placed the mugs on the counter, pretending I hadn't heard. When Ethan returned, she flashed me that practiced smile, syrupy sweet, the kind she used like perfume to mask the rot underneath. From that day on, I began to pay attention. Every comment about my clothes, my car, my old lady job at the flower shop, they weren't idle insults. They were groundwork. Brick by brick, she was building a case. Marjorie can't take care of herself. Marjorie doesn't need space. Marjorie shouldn't be alone. It wasn't cruelty for cruelty's sake. It was strategy. The night after the wedding, I sat at my kitchen table with a cup of lukewarm tea, staring at my phone. My thumb hovered over a contact I hadn't called in years. Amelia Johnson. We'd been friends in high school, drifted apart, then reconnected briefly before Robert passed. Amelia had built a career in real estate, climbing her way into an agency that handled some of the city's most lucrative deals. If anyone could uncover Juliet's truth, it was her. I dialed. She answered on the third ring, her voice warm and familiar. Marjorie Carter. Lord, it's been a minute. Too long, I said, swallowing the lump in my throat. Amelia, I need a favor, and it's not small. I explained everything, the slap, the demand for my keys, the whispers I'd overheard. Amelia listened quietly, the line filled only with the scratch of her pen. Finally, she said, send me their full names, Ethan Carter and Juliet. Juliet Price, I whispered. There was a pause, then a sigh. Give me a week, I'll dig. But Marjorie, brace yourself. When people want what you have, they'll do anything to get it. The week stretched like molasses. I busied myself at the flower shop, trimming roses, arranging lilies, pretending my life hadn't cracked wide open. But even the fragrance of blossoms couldn't cover the sour taste in my mouth. Customers came and went, smiling, chatting, unaware that behind my polite nods, my mind replayed Juliet's sneer on a loop. On the seventh day, Amelia called. Girl, she said, her voice tight, you'd better sit down. I sank into the armchair by the window, clutching the phone. They're drowning in debt, she said. Credit cards maxed, student loans unpaid. Ethan's car is leased, not owned. Juliet's parents refinanced their house, last year messy situation. And here's the kicker. Juliet's been browsing listings in your building. I found her name on inquiry forms. She's been planning this for months. My stomach twisted. So the marriage, a financial strategy, Amelia finished. She didn't marry your son out of love, Marjorie. She married him because of you. The words hit harder than Juliet's slap. That night, I couldn't sleep. I lay in bed, staring at the ceiling fan, listening to its soft whir. For years I had worn humility like armor, hiding wealth to protect Ethan from envy, from opportunists, but I had protected him too well, shielded him so much he couldn't see when danger walked right through the front door. Now danger wore white satin and called me, Mama. I turned on the lamp, pulled out the small fireproof safe Robert and I had hidden behind the bedroom dresser, and opened it with trembling hands. Inside lay documents no one but me had seen, property deeds, stock portfolios, a trust fund Ethan didn't know existed, proof that the old woman Juliet mocked was worth more than her wildest dreams. My reflection in the dresser mirror stared back at me, soft arms, tired eyes, a body the world dismissed as weak. But behind that reflection, I saw the steel Robert had always seen. They thought I was fragile, they thought I could be bullied, but they had no idea who I really was. One evening, as I watered the balcony plants, I spotted a familiar figure on the street below. Joseph, my longtime neighbor, waved up at me. We'd shared this building for nearly 20 years. A kind man with a limp from his days as a firefighter. When I joined him in the lobby later, he shook his head gravely. Marjorie, I don't like what I'm seeing. Your boy used to greet me every time he came by. These last few months, he rushes in, doesn't look me in the eye, like he's ashamed. The word pierced me. Be careful, Joseph warned. There's something in his eyes lately, not the Ethan I remember. I thanked him, carrying the weight of his words upstairs. Alone in my apartment, I whispered to myself, I've already lost my son, but I won't lose myself. 2 weeks later, Amelia handed me a folder across the table at a quiet cafe. Her nails tapped nervously against her cup. Marjorie, this is worse than I thought. They've consulted lawyers. They're exploring guardianship petitions. I froze. Guardianship, yes. If they can prove you're not mentally competent, they can control your assets. They've been documenting everything: your age, your job, the old car, even your weight. They're building a narrative that you can't take care of yourself. My blood ran cold. It wasn't just greed anymore. It was a heist in progress. That night, as I tucked the folder into my safe, I whispered into the stillness of my apartment, you think I'm weak. You think you can strip me of my dignity. But you don't know me. You don't know Marjorie Carter. I closed the safe with a firm click. The war had begun. And this time, I wasn't hiding behind humility. I was stepping into the light. The morning sun poured through the blinds, striping my living room with gold. I sat stiffly on the couch, folder from Amelia pressed to my chest like a shield. Guardianship. The word wouldn't leave me. It circled in my head like a vulture. At 9 o'clock sharp, the doorbell rang. Carlos stood there, tall and broad-shouldered, his tailored suit crisp against the September breeze. His presence filled the room before he even stepped inside. "Marjorie," he said warmly, though his eyes carried the weight of seriousness. "Let's talk." We sat at the kitchen table. I spread the papers Amelia had given me, debt statements, inquiry forms, whispers of Juliet's schemes. Carlos studied them silently, tapping his pen against his notepad. When he finally spoke, his voice was low, steady. "They're moving fast. If Juliet Spartaned, from what you've described, she push Ethan to file for guardianship within months." My stomach tightened. "And if they succeed," he leaned forward, fingers laced, "if a court declares you incompetent, Ethan becomes your guardian. That means control over your apartment, your finances, every decision you make. Juliet will have what she wants." The words chilled me. My own son, my blood. Carlos must have seen the tremor in my hands because his tone softened. "But we're not helpless. We can build a defense. You're sharp, independent, working part-time, managing your home. That doesn't scream incompetence. It screams resilience." I exhaled slowly, clutching my teacup like it could anchor me. "I'm tired of playing defense, Carlos. They've already humiliated me. I want to fight back." A flicker of approval crossed his face. "Then we'll fight. But carefully. Think of this as a chess game. Every move must count." Later that afternoon, Ethan called. I hadn't heard from him since the wedding. My heart lurched at his name flashing on the screen, but his voice was flat, rehearsed. "Mom, Juliet, and I think it's best if you give us a set of keys. You know, in case of emergencies." My chest tightened. "Emergencies or convenience?" A pause. Then, more firmly, "Don't make this difficult. Juliet's right. You shouldn't be living alone at your age. What if something happens?" I bit back the words clawing at my throat. "Something already happened. Ethan, you abandoned me." "Instead," I said calmly, "I appreciate your concern, but I've managed just fine." His sigh crackled through the line. "Mom, why do you always have to resist? We're trying to help." Help. The word stung. Help had become a leash, a disguise for control. When the call ended, I sat in silence, tears threatening. Ethan wasn't my son anymore. He was Juliet's echo. That evening, I confided in Amelia at the cafe. She listened, her hand resting gently on mine. "You can't appeal to Ethan right now," she said firmly. "He's under her spell. You need to protect yourself. Document everything, and prepare for the day they try something drastic." "Document everything," she nodded. "Every phone call, every visit, every remark. Paper trails save lives in courtrooms." Her words echoed long after she left. That night, I bought a leather-bound journal. On the first page, I wrote in bold letters, "The truth they can't erase." The entries began simple. "Ethan called today, asked for keys again." Sounded rehearsed. Juliet texted, "We should discuss your future," implying control. But as days passed, the pages filled with sharper details, tone of voice, timing, contradictions. My handwriting grew darker, angrier. It was more than documentation. It was survival. 2 weeks later, Juliet appeared unannounced at my door. She carried a basket of muffins, her smile stretched thin. "Marjorie," she said, stepping inside before I could protest, "I've been thinking, you must be so lonely here. This place is too much for one person." I stiffened. "I like my solitude." Her eyes swept the apartment, lingering on the safe tucked discreetly in the corner. A glimmer of greed passed across her face before she masked it with concern. "Ethan and I worry about you," she could. "Why don't you move in with us? We'll take care of everything. Bills, meals, company. Doesn't that sound nice? Prison disguised as comfort." I smiled faintly. "That's kind of you, Juliet, but no." Her smile faltered. "No, no." For a flicker of a moment, her mask cracked. Her jaw tightened, eyes narrowing. Then, just as quickly, the sugary tone returned. "Well, think about it. We only want what's best." She left the basket on my counter like a calling card, the smell of artificial blueberries clinging to the air long after she was gone. That night, I tossed the muffins into the trash. Carlos reviewed my journal entries weekly, each time nodding with increasing satisfaction. "This is good," he said one evening, adjusting his glasses. "It paints a picture of coercion, manipulation, exploitation. If they try guardianship, we'll bury them with their own words." "But Carlos," I said quietly. What if Ethan truly believes I'm incompetent? He looked me dead in the eye. Then it's our job to remind him who you are. Sometimes children forget their mothers are warriors. Meanwhile, Ethan's visits became colder. He no longer lingered to talk, no longer asked about my garden or the shop. Instead, he inspected, opened cabinets, glanced at my refrigerator, noted the expiration dates on food. Juliet's fingerprints were all over his behavior. One night, after a particularly tense visit, I broke down in front of Amelia. I've lost him, I whispered, tears sliding down my cheeks. I've lost my son. She squeezed my hand. Maybe, but maybe not forever. Right now, the best way to fight for him is to fight for yourself. And so, I fought. I revamped my routine, made sure every part of my life reflected independence. I renewed my driver's license, scheduled a health checkup, took photos of myself at the flower shop with colleagues, proof of vitality, proof that I was not the frail old woman Juliet wanted the world to see. At night, I stood on my balcony, city lights glittering, and whispered into the darkness, "You think you can erase me, but you're underestimating the woman who raised a son on nothing but grit and faith. You may have Ethan for now, but you will never have me." One evening, Carlos handed me a sealed envelope. "Open it only when the time is right," he instructed. "Inside is a strategy documents, statements, things that will stop them cold. But timing is everything. If you use it too soon, they'll adapt. Wait until the knife is at your throat." I slid the envelope into my safe, my pulse racing. The war wasn't just coming, it was already here. And I, Marjorie Carter, was ready. The envelope arrived on a Wednesday morning, tucked neatly between grocery coupons and utility bills. I slid it open, absent-mindedly, still in my robe, a steaming mug of coffee in hand. Then the words struck me like a blade. Petition for guardianship, filed by Ethan Carter and Juliet Price Carter. I sank into the armchair, the papers trembling in my grip. My son, my own flesh and blood, had signed his name beneath the declaration that I was mentally and physically incapable of managing personal and financial affairs. It was one thing to suspect betrayal, another to see it in black ink. I read every line, my stomach churning. They listed my age, my modest part-time income, the Buick I drove, even my body weight. They called me isolated. They implied early cognitive decline. Lies, dressed as concern. At the bottom of the page, Juliet's signature bloomed in careful cursive. Ethan's scrawled next to it. The paper felt heavier than stone. I called Carlos immediately. He answered on the first ring, his voice calm but urgent. "They filed." Yes, my throat was raw. "Carlos, they actually filed. I need you to breathe, Marjorie. This is what we expected. It means they're overplaying their hand. You're not incompetent, you're independent. This petition is a weapon, but it can be turned against them." I clutched the phone like a lifeline. "So what do we do?" "First," he said, "we don't panic. Second, we gather every document, every journal entry, every photo that proves your competence. We'll shred their case before it sees a courtroom." For the first time since opening that envelope, I exhaled. Still, the shame spread faster than fire. By Friday, whispers circulated through the building. In the lobby, Mrs. Green from 4B asked softly, "Are you all right, Marjorie? I heard Ethan is concerned about you." Concerned, that poisonous word again. I forced a smile. "I'm fine, thank you." But the looks lingered, pitying, doubtful. Juliet's narrative was working. At the flower shop, a customer leaned across the counter and murmured, "It's brave of your son to step in like that. Not every child would." I wanted to scream, "Step in, he's stepping on me." Instead, I handed her the bouquet with steady hands, my heart pounding. The gossip stung worse than the petition, because gossip, unlike paper, seeps into people's bones. That evening, Amelia came over, arms full of takeout and wine. She dropped the food on my table and pulled me into a fierce hug. "Don't you dare believe their lies," she said, her voice thick with anger. "They're rewriting your story, Marjorie. We're here to write it back. Over sesame noodles and too much Chardonnay." She walked me through the plan. "I've got contacts in the press," she said, "friends who owe me favors. If this ever goes public, we'll make sure your truth shines brighter than their lies." Her faith bolstered me. Still, I couldn't shake the ache. "Amelia," I whispered, "do you think Ethan believes this? Truly believes I'm unfit?" She hesitated. "I think he believes what Juliet tells him, and right now, Juliet is his world." The next week, Ethan visited. He stood in my living room like a stranger, his hands shoved in his pockets. Juliet hovered by the door, arms crossed, her eyes sharp. "Mom," he began awkwardly, "this guardianship, it's not about control, it's about making sure you're safe." I forced myself to meet his eyes. "Safe from what, Ethan?" "Myself, or from your wife's ambition." His jaw tightened. "Don't do this. Don't make it ugly." My laugh was bitter. "Your father and I built this life brick by brick, and now you call me unfit to manage it. That's ugly, Ethan." Juliet stepped forward, her tone syrupy. "Marjorie, please, we love you. We just want what's best." I turned to her, my voice steel. "No, Juliet, you want what's yours. You married my son for my apartment. Don't insult me by pretending otherwise." Her eyes flashed, but she quickly masked it. She tugged Ethan's arm, pulling him toward the door. "This isn't over," she whispered, as the door clicked shut behind them. I leaned against it, trembling but not broken. Carlos came by that weekend. He carried a briefcase and a calm I envied. "Good news," he said, laying documents on my table. "We'll counter their petition with medical records, work references, affidavits from neighbors and colleagues. Judges hate frivolous guardianship cases. If we show this is driven by greed, not need, it'll collapse. And if it doesn't," he looked me squarely in the eye, "then we expose them, publicly, brutally, with everything you've been holding back." He tapped the sealed envelope he'd given me weeks ago. "When the time is right, Marjorie, that's your weapon." I nodded, though fear gnawed at me. The thought of dragging Ethan through a courtroom felt like tearing my own heart out. But then I remembered Juliet's sneer, the slap, the signatures at the bottom of that petition. They'd already torn it first. One night, unable to sleep, I opened my journal and flipped to the first page. The truth they can't erase. I reread every entry. Ethan's scripted calls, Juliet's veiled threats, the muffins, the inspections, the whispers. Piece by piece, the puzzle revealed itself. Not just greed, but a campaign, a war of attrition designed to wear me down until I surrendered. I traced my finger over the ink, my reflection faint in the lamplight. For the first time in months, I felt something bloom beneath the fear. Not anger. Resolve. On Sunday, Joseph caught me in the lobby again. He held out a jar of homemade jam, his eyes kind. "I don't believe what they're saying," he said firmly. "I've watched you for years, Marjorie. You're sharper than half this building combined. Don't let them dim your light." Tears pricked my eyes. "Thank you, Joseph." He squeezed my hand. "And when the time comes, I'll testify. You're not alone." His words carried me upstairs like a buoy. Alone, but not alone. Targeted, but not helpless. The guardianship hearing was set for 6 weeks away. 6 weeks until a judge decided whether I was still mistress of my own life or property to be managed. But I wasn't waiting for the gavel. Every morning, I wrote in my journal. Every evening, I gathered evidence. Amelia worked her press contacts. Carlos refined the strategy. Joseph prepared his testimony. Juliet thought she was tightening chains around me. But what she didn't see was that I was sharpening keys. Keys that would unlock the truth. Keys that would turn her prison into her downfall. The courthouse smelled faintly of dust and old paper, the kind of air that clung to your clothes long after you left. I stood at the base of the marble steps, smoothing the folds of my navy dress. It wasn't new, but it was clean, pressed, dignified. I wanted the judge to see, not an old woman crumbling under age, but a woman who carried herself with pride. Carlos met me at the entrance, briefcase in hand. His calm presence grounded me. "Remember," he murmured, "this isn't just about what they say. It's about how you stand. Dignity wins hearts." I nodded, clutching my journal like a shield. Inside, the courtroom buzzed with murmurs. Friends, neighbors, even a few strangers who'd caught wind of the case had come to watch. It felt less like a legal proceeding and more like a stage play, and I was both the accused and the audience's secret hope. Juliet swept in like royalty, clad in a cream suit that screamed money she didn't have. Ethan trailed behind, shoulders slumped, gaze fixed on the floor. "Ready?" Juliet whispered to him, her hand squeezing his arm. He didn't answer. The judge, a silver-haired woman with sharp glasses, called us to order. "We are here today to consider the petition of Ethan and Juliet Carter for guardianship over Marjorie Carter." Juliet rose first, her voice smooth as silk. "Your Honor," she began, "we love Marjorie dearly. She has been a wonderful mother, but her recent behavior raises serious concerns. She forgets things. She isolates herself. She drives an outdated car that isn't safe. She clings to an apartment too large for her to maintain. We only want to protect her from harm." Every word dripped with counterfeit compassion. I clenched my fists under the table. "Protect me. From what? Living my own life." The judge scribbled notes. "Thank you, Mrs. Carter. Do you have evidence?" Juliet gestured gracefully, as though rehearsed. "Yes, Your Honor. Neighbors have reported erratic behavior. She continues working part-time despite her age, suggesting poor judgment. And," she paused, letting her words hang, "she has been emotionally unstable. At our wedding, she caused a public scene that was recorded by several guests." A ripple of whispers swept the courtroom. I felt every eye burn into me. Juliet pressed her hand to her chest. "It was heartbreaking. We want to give her dignity, but she refuses help. That's why we must step in." The mask of the devoted daughter-in-law was flawless. For a moment, I almost believed she could win. CarlosRose.com, but fierce. "Your Honor," he said, "we acknowledge the love Ethan and Juliet claim, but beneath their words lies a troubling pattern. Their petition is not about safety. It is about seizing control of Mrs. Carter's assets." Juliet's smile faltered, but she quickly recovered. Carlos continued, "We have affidavits from Marjorie's employer at the flower shop, confirming her punctuality, accuracy, and excellent memory. We have testimony from neighbors who will attest to her independence and clarity. And most importantly," he tapped the folder, "we have financial records showing Ethan and Juliet are drowning in debt." Gasps rippled across the room. Juliet stiffened. Ethan's head sank lower. The judge adjusted her glasses. "Mrs. Carter, would you like to speak for yourself?" My knees trembled as I stood, but when I looked at Juliet's smug face, something inside me hardened. "Yes, Your Honor," I said, voice steadier than I expected. "I may be sick. I may not drive a new car or wear designer clothes, but I am not incompetent. I manage my bills. I work part-time because I enjoy it." And the so-called public scene at the wedding. I turned to the audience, letting them see my eyes. That was not instability. That was humiliation. Juliet slapped me in front of over 100 guests because I refused to give her my home. And my son, my voice cracked. My son stood silent. The courtroom erupted in whispers. I laid my journal on the podium. "For months, I've recorded every insult, every attempt to belittle me. You'll see patterns of coercion, not decline. They don't want to protect me. They want to possess me." The judge leaned forward, her gaze sharp. "Do you have corroboration?" Carlos signaled. Joseph, my neighbor, rose from the benches. His voice rang firm. "I was there, Your Honor. I saw Juliet strike her. I've seen Marjorie shop, pay bills, carry herself with more sense than half this building. She doesn't need guardianship. She needs freedom from manipulation." Juliet's mask cracked. Her lips tightened, her eyes blazing. When court adjourned for recess, I stepped into the hallway. Reporters hovered, notebooks poised. Amelia slipped through the crowd, her phone buzzing with messages. "They're eating this up," she whispered. The moment Joseph confirmed the slap, people's sympathies swung your way. Social media's already buzzing. I almost laughed through the nerves, my humiliation turning into my weapon. Across the hall, Juliet hissed at Ethan. "Say something. Damn it. You're supposed to back me up," he muttered. "I didn't sign up for this." "Yes, you did," she snapped. "You signed the papers." The venom in her voice was loud enough for bystanders to hear. More whispers, more eyes turning against her. Back in the courtroom, Juliet tried to recover. She painted me as paranoid, claiming the journal entries were fabrications of a lonely old woman. But the more she spoke, the more desperate she sounded. Ethan was called to the stand. His testimony was halting, uncertain. "Mom, I just thought maybe you'd be happier with less responsibility," Juliet said. He trailed off under the judge's piercing stare. "Mr. Carter," she said sharply, "do you believe your mother is incapable of managing her affairs?" Ethan swallowed hard. "I don't know." The silence that followed was damning. Juliet's face turned to stone. Carlos seized the moment. "Your Honor, the petitioners can't even agree on their claims, but the pattern is clear. Pressure, manipulation, financial desperation. Mrs. Carter is not unfit. She is targeted." The judge tapped her pen thoughtfully. "I will review the evidence and issue a ruling in due course." Her gavel struck, echoing like thunder. As we filed out, Juliet brushed past me, her voice a low snarl. "Enjoy this little victory, Marjorie. It won't last." But for the first time in months, I felt something solid under my feet. Not just survival. Momentum. The night after court, I barely slept. My mind replayed every word, every glance, every shiver in Ethan's voice. Part of me wanted to hold him, whispered that I understood his fear. Another Daka, sharper, wanted to shake him until the blindness fell away. Carlos called early the next morning. They're rattled. He said, "That's good. Tomorrow, we play our strongest hand." "What hand?" I asked. "You'll see. Just trust me." I had no choice. Trust was all I had left. The second day in court began with a strange energy. The benches were packed, people whispering like they'd come for a theater matinee. Some even brought coffee and notebooks. My humiliation had become a public spectacle, but now, at least, the story wasn't one-sided. Juliet walked in wearing a crimson dress, a bold defiance of yesterday's cracks. Her lipstick was sharp as blood. Ethan trailed behind, paler than ever. When the judge called us to order, Carlos rose with quiet confidence. "Your Honor," he began, "yesterday we heard accusations of instability and irresponsibility. Today, we offer truth." He placed a stack of folders on the table. "Marjorie Carter may live modestly, but she is not without means. In fact, for the past 20 years, she has carefully invested portions of her earnings, real estate, retirement accounts, small stocks. What my learned opponents did not expect is that Mrs. Carter is in fact far from a financial liability. She is solvent, independent, and most inconveniently for them aware." Juliet's smile froze. Carlos opened the first folder. "Here are the deeds to 2 small rental properties Mrs. Carter has owned since her late husband's passing. Here are the bank statements showing consistent management, no overdrafts, no missed payments." And here he held up a thick packet. "Are records of Ethan and Juliet's mounting debts, credit cards, unpaid loans, and a failed business venture from 2 years ago." Gasps filled the courtroom. The judge arched an eyebrow. "Is this accurate, Mr. Carter?" Ethan's lips trembled. Juliet seized his hand. "Irrelevant. Our finances have nothing to do with Marjorie's competency." Carlos leaned forward, voice steady as steel. "On the contrary, Your Honor, it speaks directly to motive. Why would a healthy, independent woman suddenly need guardianship, lest those seeking it had something to gain?" The audience murmured, agreement buzzing like a hive. Juliet shot to her feet. "This is slander. We only want what's best for her." "Really?" Carlos asked, calm as ice. "Then why, 3 months ago, did you attempt to convince Mrs. Carter to sign over her home in exchange for your care? Why did you slap her when she refused?" Juliet's face flushed crimson to match her dress. "That's a lie." Joseph stood from the gallery. "I saw it with my own eyes." The judge banged her gavel. Order in the court. But the damage was done. Juliet's mask was crumbling. When it was my turn to testify again, I walked to the stand with my journal in hand. My palms were sweaty, but my spine felt straighter than it had in years. "Your Honor," I began, "I may not be perfect. I forget small things sometimes, like where I put my keys. But I am not incompetent. I raised my son alone after his father died. I worked 2 jobs. I saved every dollar I could. I built a life from scraps. And now, my own son and his wife want to take that life from me, not to protect me, but to pay off their debts." I opened my journal, flipping through pages. Here is every insult Juliet has thrown at me, every manipulation, every guilt trip. I wrote them down because I knew one day no one would believe me. "Well, today is that day." I read aloud one entry. "April 3rd, Juliet told me I was selfish for not selling the apartment," said Ethan, "and she could use the money to start over. When I said no, she said I didn't love my son." I closed the book. My voice shook, but it carried. "If that's love, Your Honor, then I fear to see what cruelty looks like." The room was silent. Even the judge seemed to pause, her pen still over the page. Juliet snapped. "You ungrateful hag," she shouted, forgetting the courtroom, the judge, the audience. "You've held Ethan hostage with your guilt for decades. You think because you raised him alone you own him. He's mine now, mine. And I'll be damned if I let some bitter old woman control him anymore." The gallery gasped. Phones clicked as reporters captured every word. The judge's voice was ice. "Mrs. Carter, control yourself." But it was too late. The mask had shattered completely. Ethan rose slowly, his face drained of color. For the first time, he looked not at Juliet, not at the judge, but at me. "Mom." His voice cracked. "Is all of this true?" I met his gaze, tears burning my eyes. "Yes, Ethan. Every word." He looked down, shoulders shaking. Juliet grabbed his arm, but he pulled away. "Juliet," he whispered, "I didn't know it was this bad." She sneered. "Don't you dare turn on me now. After everything I've done for you, done for me." His voice rose, trembling with something between anger and grief. "You dragged me into this circus. You turned me against my own mother." The room erupted in murmurs again. The judge struck the gavel. "Enough. I have heard more than enough for today. We will reconvene tomorrow for closing arguments." As people filed out, reporters swarmed, cameras flashed, questions flew. But all I could see was Ethan, standing frozen in the aisle, torn between the woman who birthed him and the woman who chained him. And for the first time, I saw the boy I raised lost, scared, desperate for someone to guide him back into the light. That night, the headlines blazed: courtroom eruption, daughter-in-law accused of manipulation, assets revealed, mother's journal exposes shocking family betrayal, guardianship case turns into scandal. Who really needs protection? Juliet had wanted a show. She got one, but not the role she'd imagined. The third day dawned heavy with storm clouds. Rain lashed against my window, as if the sky itself wanted to bear witness to what was coming. I dressed carefully, choosing a charcoal gray suit jacket over my dress. Strong, simple, no frills, a soldier's uniform for the battlefield. Carlos picked me up, his car wipers beating in steady rhythm. He glanced at me once and gave a small nod. "Today, we closed the circle." I breathed deep, the way my pastor used to tell us before prayer. Inhale strength, exhale fear. The courthouse was overflowing. Reporters jostled for space at the doors, cameras flashing like lightning. The case had become more than a family matter. It was a story of dignity, greed, betrayal, a story people could not turn away from. Inside, the air crackled with tension. Juliet entered like a storm herself, face painted into brittle perfection. She wore black now, as if mourning a loss she refused to admit. Ethan walked behind her, but there was distance between them, an invisible canyon. When the judge called us to order, the hush was absolute. "Today," she said, "we will hear final arguments before I deliver my ruling." Juliet was first. She rose with the grace of an actress, voice quivering at the edges. "Your Honor," she began, "I admit I let my emotions show yesterday. But please understand it is only because I love my husband's mother so fiercely. I worry for her. I see her aging, alone, making choices that could harm her." Yes, my words were harsh, but they came from a place of desperation. Without guardianship, she will spiral. And when that happens, who will bear the cost? Who will protect her then? She turned, sweeping her gaze across the courtroom. "Is it such a crime to want to keep family safe?" For a moment, silence hung. She was good to good. I could see heads in the gallery tilt, sympathy flickering. Then Carlos stood. "Your Honor, with respect, what we witnessed yesterday was not love. It was possession. Mrs. Carter does not seek guardianship out of care. She seeks it out of control." He stepped closer to the bench, his voice low but carrying. "Marjorie Carter is not spiraling. She is thriving. The evidence proves it. The witnesses confirm it. And the woman herself has shown it. What spirals here is not her life but Juliet's mask." A murmur rippled. Carlos turned to me. "Mrs. Carter, would you like to speak your last words to the court?" My legs shook as I rose, but I stood tall. I faced the judge, the room, my son. All my life, I've been told what I can't do. Can't make it on my own. Can't raise a boy without a man. Can't keep up with a world that moves too fast. But I did all those things, not perfectly, but faithfully. I gave Ethan everything I had, not just food or And now, when I should be allowed to rest in the dignity I earned, I am dragged here to prove I deserve to own my own name. I opened my journal one last time. This is not just paper. It is my memory, my shield. I wrote down there cruelty not to wallow, but to survive. Because when you are gaslit long enough, you start to doubt the ground under your feet. This book reminds me, I am not crazy. I am not worthless. I am not invisible. I turned, locking eyes with Juliet. "You wanted to erase me, but I will not be erased." The gallery erupted in applause before the judge silenced them. Then came the moment. Ethan was called. He looked broken as he walked to the stand. His suit was wrinkled, his tie askew. For once, he didn't glance at Juliet for permission. "Mr. Carter," the judge said, "you have heard the arguments. What do you believe?" He swallowed, eyes darting between us. "My mother, she's strong, stronger than I've ever been. I didn't see it before. I let myself be blinded. His voice cracked. Juliet said it was love. But love shouldn't feel like chains. Love shouldn't mean tearing someone down to lift yourself up. Juliet hissed Ethan, but he didn't turn. He looked at me, tears glistening. Mom, I'm sorry. I should have defended you. I should have been your son. Instead, I was a coward. My throat closed, but I forced myself to nod. Forgiveness could come later. Right now, I needed truth. The courtroom was hushed, every soul leaning forward. Juliet's mask shattered once more. You pathetic little boy, she spat, her voice rising in hysteria. You'd throw away everything we've built for her. For a woman who clings to the past, who can't let go. She ruined us. The judge slammed her gavel. Mrs. Carter, enough. But Juliet wasn't listening anymore. Her words poured like poison, raw and unfiltered. She doesn't deserve freedom. She doesn't deserve respect. She's weak. That apartment, that money, that life should have been ours. Gasps filled the room. Reporters scribbled furiously. And in that moment, the battle was over. Juliet had unmasked herself completely. The judge's voice cut through the chaos like a blade. I have heard all I need to hear. This court will reconvene tomorrow for my ruling. Until then, Mrs. Carter, you remain free of guardianship. Her gavel struck final. Cold. The gallery buzzed like a storm. Some rushed to me, shaking my hand, whispering, "You did it." Cameras flashed, voices rose, but all I felt was exhaustion and a strange, fragile relief. Ethan approached, hesitant. Mom, I raised a hand. Not now. Tomorrow, maybe, but not now. His face crumpled, but he nodded. Juliet stormed out, flanked by reporters hungry for her fall, and I stood in the eye of the storm, journal pressed to my chest, knowing tomorrow would bring the verdict. But in my heart, I already knew that truth had been set free. And truth, once free, cannot be caged again. The courthouse was a furnace the next morning. Heat shimmered through tall windows, though the air was heavy with more than whether it was the weight of anticipation. Every bench was full. Reporters lined the back, their cameras poised like weapons. I sat in the front row with Carlos beside me, my journal tucked into my purse. My fingers brushed the cover for strength. Today, the judge would decide whether I lived free or as a prisoner in my own skin. Across the aisle, Juliet looked like a statue carved from fear and fury. Her eyes were ringed dark, her lips pressed tight. Ethan sat 2 seats away, hands clenched, not daring to meet her gaze. The bailiff called order. The judge entered, her robe a river of authority. When she spoke, every sound in the room stilled. After careful consideration of testimony, evidence, and conduct witnessed in this courtroom, she began, I am ready to render my decision. My heart hammered like a drum. Guardianship, the judge said slowly, is not a matter to be taken lightly. It strips an individual of fundamental rights and should be reserved only when incapacity is clear and undeniable. In this case, the evidence does not support incapacity, quite the opposite. Mrs. Marjorie Carter has demonstrated clarity, independence, and resilience. A ripple moved through the crowd. My breath caught. The judge's gaze shifted, sharp as glass, to Juliet. What is undeniable, she continued, is the repeated pattern of manipulation and disrespect demonstrated by the petitioner. Yesterday's outburst revealed intentions far removed from love or protection. It revealed greed. Juliet flinched as though struck. Therefore, the judge declared, voice steady as steel, this petition for guardianship is denied. Furthermore, due to concerns of undue influence, this court issues a protective order. Juliet Carter is barred from attempting to coerce or interfere in Mrs. Carter's financial or personal affairs. Any violation will be met with legal consequences. The gavel struck, final. For a heartbeat, I couldn't move, couldn't breathe. The words hung in the air like bells, ringing, ringing, until they sank into my chest. Free. I was free. Carlos touched my shoulder lightly. It's over, he whispered. But it wasn't just over. It was reborn. Juliet shot to her feet, rage spilling unchecked. You can't do this, she screamed, pointing at me with shaking hands. She's manipulating all of you. She's weak, she's old, she doesn't deserve security. Moved in, guiding her toward the doors. Her cries echoed, shrill and desperate, until they were swallowed by the heavy wood closing behind her. The silence left behind was deeper than any sound. Ethan remained seated, pale and hollow-eyed. When the room emptied, he finally stood and walked to me. Mom, he whispered, his voice trembling, I don't know how to fix this. I looked at him. Rayleigh looked. The boy I had raised was still there, somewhere behind the shadows Juliet had cast. But I was no longer the woman who would sacrifice herself to pull him free. You fix it, I said softly. By learning who you are without her. By remembering the man I taught you to be. But that journey is yours, not mine. Tears streaked his face. He nodded, broken but not beyond repair. Then he left, shoulders bowed. His future, uncertain. Outside the courthouse, the world exploded. Microphones thrust toward me, reporters shouted my name, cameras clicked like machine guns. Double quotes. Mrs. Carter, how does it feel to win? Do you have a message for other seniors facing family abuse? Will you press charges against your daughter? I lifted my chin, speaking not just for myself, but for all who watched. It feels, I said, like breathing after years underwater. To anyone out there doubting their worth, believing the lies of those who tear them down, I say this: you are not weak. You are not invisible. You deserve dignity. And sometimes, you have to fight for it. The crowd erupted. For once, the story wasn't about scandal or Shamet, was about strength. Weeks later, life began to settle, though nothing would ever be the same. Juliet vanished from the city rumor mill, whispered to be living with her parents, stripped of influence. Ethan called once, saying he was filing for divorce. I listened, silent, until he finished. Then I wished him strength and told him I'd be here if he ever truly chose to rebuild. But my life was no longer bound to theirs. I returned to my flower shop. The smell of roses and earth welcoming me like an embrace. Customers came, some strangers, some old friends, all with words of admiration. One woman pressed my hand and said, "You gave me courage to leave my son's abuse. Thank you." The foundation Carlos helped me establish grew quickly, supporting seniors in need of legal defense. For the first time, I wasn't just surviving, I was leading. One evening I sat on my balcony with my journal open. The city lights flickered, and the air carried the scent of jasmine. I wrote slowly, carefully, letting the words seal my journey. This is not the end. This is the beginning. Dignity is not a gift, it is a right. And I will never again let anyone take it from me. I closed the book and smiled. Somewhere, deep inside, I felt Robert's presence steady, proud, as if whispering, "You did it, Marjorie. You kept the fire alive." And for the first time in a long, long while, I believed it.